Hi, I'm Melissa Ray of Thrive Beauty Services. I provide transformational beauty services in salon, at home, on site, and at your convenience. I'm proud to be sponsoring Get Conscious Now.
My name is Greg Relow. I'm a local attorney and mediator. I am pleased to be associated with Get Conscious Now. I find the show inspiring. I hope you enjoy the show. Please contact me for help on all your legal matters. I look forward to it.
Hello everyone, I'm Patricia DiOrio. Welcome to Get Conscious Now. Thanks for tuning in today. And I'd like to thank this wonderful studio audience for being here today as well. Thanks so much. We always enjoy the presence of a live audience. Well, today I'm very excited about our show because we're going to be interviewing two people who are international celebrities in the area of personal growth, conscious living, and conscious loving. But before you meet them, I want to introduce my co-host, Stu Zimmerman, who always brings his special brand of magic to the show. Hi, Stu.
Hi, Patricia. Thank you, as always. It's such a pleasure to be here. And welcome, everybody. If you're new to the program, thank you for tuning in. And if you're not new, still thank you for tuning in. If you've missed any of our shows, and now we're in our third season, we've had over 35 shows already in the can, so to speak. We've had some great guests come on. If you've missed any of our shows, come to our YouTube channel or come to our website, getconsciousnow.com. You'll find us, you'll see some great programs with Deepak Chopra, Michael Beckwith, Barbara DeAngelis, and a host of others. And pretty soon, this one will be right among the annals, if not the best. I can feel it. So please stay with us for the entire show today. And Patricia, why don't you share with everybody who we have?
Yes. So I've been wanting to interview this couple for as many years as I've been doing television. And they are Gay and Katie Hendricks, who are trailblazers in the area of relationships, conscious loving, and body intelligence. And their modern classic, Conscious Loving, changed the landscape of romantic love for more than 25 years ago, and they are still going strong with their latest book, Conscious Loving Ever After. Which is perfect timing for all us aging baby boomers who are still trying to find happiness in relationships. They're actually authors of more than 30 books, including bestsellers The Big Leap and 5 Wishes. During the past 30 years, they have appeared on hundreds of radio and television shows and networks, including Oprah Winfrey twice, CNN, CNBC, and CBS's 48 Hours. In 1989, they founded the Hendricks Institute, which offers seminars annually in North America, Asia, and Europe. Their nonprofit organization, the Foundation for Conscious Living, funds research, films, media, and scholarships in the area of conscious relationships and natural well-being. And they live right in our own backyard of Ojai, California. So please give a warm welcome to Gay and Katie.
Yeah! Yay!
I don't know. I'm a little nervous today. I don't know what that's about.
We got a great crowd. It'll be perfect.
I know.
We're all supporting you.
I know. Thank you. So for 30 years, you've been in what you refer to as a living laboratory of your relationship. I found that very fascinating because I think that those of us that are on this spiritual path and seeking are smart to look at our lives as a laboratory for really waking up. What I wanted to ask you to start with is, can you both share when you first became aware of your relationship as an opportunity for personal growth in your own personal experience of relationship? When was that?
I would say it was moment one, actually.
Moment one.
Yeah, moment one. We had one of those across a crowded room recognition. We recognized each other. And I think from the very moment we connected, there was an energy between us that has constantly been alive and evolving. And really, I think what we're really up to is, one, having more fun in relationship, because that isn't something that most people think is possible in their close relationships. And then also really being in support of each other's creativity. And when we first met, And one of the things I first appreciated about you was your enormous creativity. And being able to have my creativity and to support your creativity, what started to happen is this flow of co-creativity, which has created a living laboratory. And that's just been so much fun day to day, you know, better and better every day.
I think when I first met Katie, it was 38 years ago now, and the first time I saw her, I had just kind of made some big decisions about relationship in my life. I decided that I only wanted to be in relationships where people could express themselves honestly with each other and people knew how to listen to each other. And also I wanted to be in a relationship where we didn't spend all of our time with blaming each other and criticizing each other, that we both took responsibility for things that went on. And so when I first saw Katie, not only did I think she was the most gorgeous woman I'd ever seen in my life, but she just looked like pure possibility to me. You know, she looked like she was willing to just learn whatever needed to be learned in relationship. And I remember our very first conversation where I said something to her like, you know, I'm really attracted to you.
That was the very first thing he said to me. It was good.
I'd really like to ask you out for coffee, but I want to let you know I've just decided that I only want to be in relationships where both people tell the truth and both people take responsibility for themselves and both people are committed to their creativity. So on those terms, can we have a cup of coffee together? And she said,
well, what I heard was, hey, I don't care what you're doing. I want you to drop everything you're doing, and I want you to come away and have this adventure with me of, you know, creating something in relationship. I don't know what it is, but I really would like you to do that. What do you think? And that's what I heard. So what I responded to was, how about lunch?
yeah.
So I kind of upped the ante.
At that moment, though, my life really both ended and started at the same time because I'd created all sorts of different relationship dramas like many of us do in my teens and 20s and everything. And when I finally met Katie, it looked like to me that this was what I always wanted. And then my job for the next 38 years was to make sure I didn't mess it up.
And you were both in your 30s then, right?
I was 34 and you were...
I was almost 31.
31,
Yeah.
It was really interesting
story.
when you guys were talking and you said something and this is what you heard, which was slightly, possibly a little different than what you thought you said.
yeah.
How is that, you know, going forward in terms of, let's say you share a truth where you feel you're right, and the other person has something, you know what, that may be true, but it's not my truth. And then it can become a distinction of, you know, how does being right affect relationship and how can that stand in the way?
Well,
You want to take that one?
Good question, isn't it?
yes, I think I know more about being right in this relationship.
Okay. It's the last show they're doing, by the way, folks.
To me, being right is at the other end of the spectrum from having a conscious relationship. Because when people are locked into a position thinking they're right, they see the other person as the perpetrator and they see themselves as a victim. And we say relationship only works when both people are absolute equals and coming from a place of taking full responsibility for their lives. Everything else is an entanglement, not a relationship. And so we spent a lot of our time in our first few years really learning how to make commitments. Like we had actually a commitment to being honest with each other and a commitment to listening without judgment and a commitment to taking responsibility instead of blaming the other person.
We also have a commitment to having a good time. Just want to add that in.
Yeah, and so in the beginning, we would get stuck like everybody else in being right and defending ourselves, but then we would come back to those commitments every time. See, the good thing about commitment is it gives you a firm place to stand. If you know down in your bones that you're committed to taking responsibility for your life rather than blaming and finding fault, you've got a place to come home to when you get into those kind of interlocks.
Yeah, and you can recommit because we confuse commitment with being perfect. So if I make a commitment, people think that narrows their possibilities, and that also it's just a one-time deal. But what we found is commitment gets you on the path from where you are to where you want to go, and then recommitting returns you to the path when you mess up, which everybody does. And I wanted to respond to what you were saying, Stu, about telling your truth. And we've really explored the area of authenticity and being real and what that opens up in a relationship, that I feel I can be absolutely totally myself with Gay. I can share anything that is arising, and we've had a long time practice of doing our best to describe what's going on. I sometimes call it matching. So whatever I'm experiencing, I'm doing my best to describe that, and that takes me way to the other end of being right. It takes me into discovery. And I often find if I've got something going on, that it comes to life when I'm talking to you, because I'll start describing what's going on, and in the presence of your listening, I get to discover what I'm actually feeling or what I want to do or what that reminded me of. And so it keeps us again in that living laboratory.
Creativity.
Where we're creating and discovering, and we're also discovering each other anew. We're not repeating like old dramas over and over and over again that really sap the energy from relationships.
I'm enjoying your latest book, Conscious Loving Ever After.
Great.
And you say that that romance, great sex, romance, regeneration slows down or stops to almost a trickle after later on in life. But you disagree with that. Can you tell us? Can you tell us what your thoughts are on
Yes, we
that?
strongly disagree with that. Yes.
As a matter of fact, I just put out on Twitter today, I said a deep bow to a couple that I found news item on the internet. She was 98 and he was 95, and they just got married, and they met at the gym.
Oh, nice.
I love that. Nice. Yeah, and they'd both been married to other people for 60-some years until their spouses died, and so then they met each other at the gym, and they decided, well, let's not wait. Let's just
that could be a good choice.
But one of the things that I really admire about this stage of life is that, they always say 60 is a new 40 and 70 is a new 50 and that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what age you are. Every moment from your mid-40s on is a choice between either creativity or stagnation. Creativity or stagnation. And it's not just in a relationship, it comes from down inside, that if you keep discovering more and more of your own creativity, you're going to bring that into your close relationship. And if you can have both people really committed to opening up to more and more creativity, you get these expanding waves of creativity in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and later in life. I'm 72 now, and I've never really experienced feeling as good or being as creative as I am now. And I think that it comes from just repeatedly choosing over and over again, opening up to more creativity rather than kind of staying in the same ruts over and over again.
And here's part of the really good news is that your creativity and sexuality and all of your feelings, they all come out of the same tube. So as you're increasing your creativity, you also are feeling juicier and lively and interested in celebrating the possibilities of being together energetically, so that it's not just rote kind of having sex. It's really having an adventure of discovery. It certainly is for me, and sometimes it's incredibly cosmic, but it's always great fun and better than ever. So.
That's what everybody has to look forward to, you young sprouts.
Wow, I'm your age.
You young-looking sprout?
We're all young sprouts here, right? Timeless.
1945, right?
That's my year.
Yeah, that's my year too. Well, it's exciting, to think that we can really have the kind of relationships we thought we've dreamed of having later on in life. And I feel much more vital and alive now than I ever have, really. And I'm holding the space for that kind of happiness to come into my life as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. To try and maybe even nail down a couple of specifics that you could recommend in terms of keeping that energy alive after the relationship matures to a certain point. And let's call it even that erotic energy.
Yeah.
What would you recommend or tell our viewers and our audience in terms of some specifics in that creativity piece?
Well, you always get the amount of love out here that you give yourself. In other words, your ability to keep falling in love with yourself over and over again and reawakening new aspects of yourself spills over into relationship, where suddenly you're seeing your partner a brand new way every day. I mean, I cannot wait every day. Katie likes to sleep in a couple hours longer than I do, but I can't wait every morning to see who she's going to be, you know, and what she's going to say and what she's going to be interested in. And I have the same feeling about myself. I'm always interested to know what's next, what's next, what's next. And I think if we can live our lives that way, there's no possibility of going stagnant.
I think that another fuel for having a great erotic time together is grounding your relationship in appreciation. And I think it's one of the most underutilized and effective ways that we can connect with anybody. And we started by changing, we both grew up in very critical households, and so we both had critical filters. We would listen to each other critically. And we decided to change that into, whenever we would catch ourselves criticizing, to change that into appreciating and to develop even more appreciation for each other than any little side trips over into criticism. And so now, really our conversations are either about something that we're creating or something that we're creating with each other, or it's about appreciation. And that's really, and it creates a field where I experience that I can just expand into whatever is going on, and that's all fuel for more connection, more aliveness, more juiciness. Another thing that I like to recommend to partners of any kind, whether it's romantic or not, is to do what scientists call pattern interrupt. We get into these patterns in relationship, everything from, you know, who makes dinner, to what side of the bed you sleep on, to whether, you know, who drives. And when you start shaking those up, just those little things can make a really big difference in what tends to get to be a routine for so many people.
And I don't think we've really been taught to appreciation. We haven't been taught to appreciate ourselves, let alone, you know, really making the effort to actually appreciate the other person. And there's so much to be appreciated in our world today. But it begins with appreciating and loving ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And in Conscious Loving Ever After, we have a little interview form at the end where people can customize their appreciation. Because appreciation works even better if you fit it to the person to whom you're speaking or who you want to appreciate.
Absolutely.
Like, Gay really appreciates being appreciated for something new, like some new nuance on a character that he's been writing about. If I notice that and appreciate that, that's an extra, sort of like extra appreciation points there.
And I found that Katie really likes the detail of compliments on clothing and that kind of thing. So I don't ever just say, nice dress. I say, you know, I really like the way these patterns go in all sorts of different directions there. And so I think you kind of, it begins though with commitment. You've got to have a commitment. Any kind of personal change project, you have to kind of declare a space of, this is what I want to do. And so we have, in Conscious Loving Ever After and our other books, we actually have specific commitments in there that people can make to each other that keep you on track.
It keeps the relationship vital and alive in the moment, and creative.
Yeah.
Creative as well,
It's my turn?
I think so.
And you're looking at me like, okay.
So have we covered everything?
No, not by a long shot.
No.
Not by a long shot. Yeah, you know, you talk about that even talking isn't enough to solve problems in a relationship. What do you recommend, and you know, what do you mean by that in the first place?
Well, one of the things people don't understand in general is that only upwards of 7 to 9% of our communication is what we're actually saying, the words. So our communication is combined with tone of voice and how you're using your body and inflections and different ways that you're speaking, and that's what's really being communicated. And what we've found is that when people have come to work with us, they've most often just exhausted the talking about it. They have, they know who did what and when and the whole history and whose grandfather was responsible for it, and it doesn't make any difference at all. What makes a difference is when people come from head to heart and head to belly so that they can contact their actual feelings and be present in their whole bodies with each other. That's where the juiciness is. It's not from here. In fact, we say that this is the most important erogenous zone in the body, right here. So when you opening your throat, that is what creates the most aliveness for you and the most connection in your relationship.
One thing I never really understood before I got into relationship with Katie is, and now we teach this in our seminars, is that we figured out that the quality of listening the quality of listening determines the quality of speaking. Mm-hmm. In other words, if I'm listening through a set of filters, which I learned early on, I was always listening to fix Katie. I was listening to figure out where the flaws were in her logic.
Right, yeah, so first he was listening for criticism, and then he was listening to fix.
Yeah, and so if she would say something like, I'm tired, or something like that, I would rush in to fix it. Well, why don't you do some deep breathing, or why don't you do that? But then finally one day she said, you know, when I tell you something like, I'm tired, or I'm feeling scared right now, I don't need you to fix it at all. I'm just telling you. And I remember that moment of being, what? That didn't compute for me, you know, and just leave it alone, you know, don't try to fix it.
Right.
But, so we started really studying what kind of filters we used in listening to each other, and lo and behold, immediately we became able to speak more authentically to each other just because the field of listening was there. It was really a refreshing thing because I don't ever remember being listened to non-judgmentally much in my life, especially when I was growing up.
Right, we're always waiting for that comment, that criticism to come.
Yeah, the other shoe to drop.
And sometimes it's just really about being, needing to express and having someone there just to hear you without anything but just be a clearing for what you had to say.
But also receiving. There's something so wonderful about being received, especially at a whole body level. And I love it that I can really let go fully into you. I can share everything with you and you receive that. And then you send that energy back to me. And that's really the ground of our relationship. And that's part of what makes it a living laboratory, because everything that we write about and everything that we teach in our trainings, we practice. So we know that it works because it works with us. And so if we could do it, we know that anybody else can do it.
One of the things we also discovered early on is that both of us need a certain amount of space, alone time, and so we got in the habit of taking little breaks in the sense of meditation time apart or going for walks sometimes apart rather than always together. And so we began to calibrate when we felt we needed some space, and then we would just do that consciously rather than creating an argument to get some space, which is what a lot of people do. And it's so important. Space in a relationship is different from distance. Space is open-heartedness, and distance is being closed off and having unspoken feelings between you. But I think just the amount of space to grow in different ways has been an incredible thing. One time I heard a most amazing conversation. I was sitting on a park bench, and a woman walked up and she sat down next to me, and she had a pair of new sneakers on, and I said something about her sneakers being brand new, and she said, yes, they're my 6th pair on this trip. And I said, really, where have you walked here from? Oh, this conversation was taking place in Paris, on a park bench in Paris, France.
And also she was in her 60s, right?
Yeah, she was in her 60s at the time. And so I said, well, where did you walk from to wear out 6 pairs of sneakers? And she said, Arizona. And so she had decided, she had retired when she was 62 and decided she wanted to walk around the world. And she had a very large wedding ring on, and I said, do you have a mate here with you on the trip? And she says, nope, he's back in Arizona. And I said, well, how did that work? And she said, well, he didn't want to come with me. He wanted to watch his favorite TV shows. He didn't want to come on my walk. And so he comes to visit me now and then, but I didn't care. I wanted to walk around the world. So she took off and walked around the world. And as soon as I said goodbye to her, I said, where are you going? And she said, Portugal and Morocco.
But
That's amazing.
you know, whether you're 62 or 82 or 22 or whatever, I think it's having that kind of adventurous
right.
spirit to say, hey, you know, you can do things one way and I can do things another way, and we can both love each other throughout that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So the two of you have introduced a revolutionary concept that you call the upper limit problem. And I think I found that very interesting in your book. Can you share about that?
Yes, we think of the upper limit problem as really the one problem that we all have as humans, which is how much love and positive energy can we actually handle at a physiological level? Because we've had thousands of years of adapting very well to things going wrong, to the next threat, to the next cataclysm, to the next tribe that's invading from wherever it's invading. And the upper limit is what happens when each of us have exceeded our current level of being able to participate with things going well. And we do something, we call it an unconscious, you top out and you do something generally unconscious to bring yourself back to more. You sabotage it. And one of the most familiar ways of doing it individually is by criticizing yourself. And then in relationship, one of the most popular ways is either criticizing or breaking an agreement or both. And that is a very reliable downer. And we think that if you commit to expanding your ability to give and receive more love every day, that's a central commitment that can really make your life just wildly successful. Because when you exceed, then you can make a commitment to both recognize earlier on before, like I used to literally bang into things and bump into things. I once raised a trunk lid into my head. I didn't pass out, but it was close. And I learned that I could recognize it earlier on before it really got to be something that took me well off track. And so now I can spot it, just a little level of irritation or tiredness, and I start thinking, or things have been going so well that I think I'll just take a little time for integration, or I'll take a bath by myself, or I'll go out and lie on the hammock so that I can integrate all of that energy rather than trying to flush it down the drain.
Right. And then it opens you up for the possibility and what's on the other side of that limit.
Yeah,
that's where creativity comes.
Exactly. Well, upper limiting is usually in response to some creative thing that needs to break through. So a lot of times people sabotage themselves when there's some really creative thing that's trying to break through. Like people will, let's say, go on a diet for 3 days and they'll lose 5 pounds, and then all of a sudden on the 6th day they'll go crazy and eat a whole bunch of foods and they'll gain it back. So that's the upper limit problem. It's kind of like a set of limiting beliefs on how good you think life can be. Right. And it shows up in all sorts of places, not just in relationships, but out in the workplace too, and all over the place, just wherever people are needing to show up more creatively, there you'll find the upper limit problem too. But the nice thing to know is that there are only a certain number of specific fears that hold it in place, and once you kind of get, that's what the book The Big Leap is all about. It's all about how to get in touch with those fears so that they don't stop you next time. One of the biggest ones that people have is what I call the fear of outshining, where they're afraid of really letting themselves go to their full potential because it will outshine somebody else. And those usually go way back into childhood too.
Or generational.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question, Gay, because you're writing novels. Do you have writer's block? Would you consider that like an upper limit problem?
Yes. Writer's block is almost always an upper limit problem. Yeah, and but I've known a lot of writers in my life, and a lot of them go out of their ways to induce their own upper limit problem, because a lot of them drink too much and do other kinds of things that tend to dull their consciousness. And, so I've had to bail some of my writer colleagues out on a number of occasions by various things they've done to get themselves into trouble. Because the more creative you are, in a way, the more upper limiting you're going to be doing on yourself, because you're always working the upper limit.
Pushing that boundary.
Yeah.
So how do you effectively work with them? And
well, one thing you have to do is find out which of the big 4 fears that are underneath. There's one big fear I mentioned, the fear of outshining, that's often underneath the upper limit problem. Person unconsciously thinks, oh, I can't be this big and magnificent, boom, and then they go back down. And, but another big fear is the fear that there's what we call fundamentally flawed, where the person feels like they there's something basically wrong with them from the get-go. They feel guilty about themselves or not good about themselves. And it's always due to early programming. I mean, no baby ever comes out and says, "I'm not okay." You know? So the fear of that something fundamentally wrong needs to be kind of gotten into, and the person needs to find out that that's a false belief. The third one is the fear of being kind of abandoning or being disloyal to people in the past. A lot of people are afraid to grow because it'll mean that they'll have to leave behind other people. That's what they think. They don't have to. It's just a false belief. And the fourth one that I see all the time is a lot of people feel like they're somehow a burden in the world, and so they can't really let themselves, maybe they were told they were a burden early on, and so they experience themselves as a burden that keeps them blocked from really enjoying the kind of love they could potentially have or the kind of success they could have out there in the world. But you know, with fear, you only all you can do is just kind of peel off the levels of it and explore it a little bit, and then one day it evaporates. You can't go in there and rip it out or dislodge it or pound on a pillow to get rid of it or anything like that. You just have to explore it lovingly. And that's where loving yourself really comes in handy.
Yeah, and that's presencing, as you talk about presencing, right? When
Yes.
when you're present to an issue or a problem is the only time you can make any changes with it. Otherwise, it just runs you.
Exactly.
And with the problem of fear, our solution to that, to be able to explore all of those different levels, is something we call fear melters.
Yes.
Which are simple movements that you can do that allow you to move from reactive brain into creative brain. So if I'm scared, the big thing that happens is that you look like the enemy. And it happens in a part of my brain that's not logical. And that you can't ever talk anybody out of being afraid. But when people start to move in these fear melters that we talk about in Conscious Loving Ever After, and we have some videos that we've made of them too, you move, for example, from fight into what we call oozing. And when you're oozing, you literally cannot fight. And it gives you a break from that cycle of belief and how that gets reinforced, where you have an opening where you can move into flow and feel your resourcefulness and learn different ways of reacting. It also allows you to think differently rather than causality, you know, like I'm scared and so everything is scary. It allows you to think up new creative solutions. And so we use fear melters a lot with couples, and also we ask them to stop talking. So to when, especially if they keep triggering themselves, to drop the words out and often do something we call bodifying, where you can express the issue in your body in about 10 seconds, whereas if you try to talk about it, it can go on for paragraphs and paragraphs, and it feels like the same old grind. But when you bodify, you kind of wake up your body and you wake up a new kind of interaction with each other. So that's one of the ways we use body intelligence tools.
And
Yeah,
that was
Stu-
going to be one of my questions, you know, around from fear to flow, and how, you know, fear isn't the problem, it is the problem for everything. Yeah, so share about the rest of, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Gay. What were you going to say?
I was going to hark back to something that Stu said earlier about the truth. If one of them has one thing that they think is the truth, and
Right.
the other, one of the things we've found is that in relationships particularly, it's important to get underneath how each person perceives the truth to something that can't be argued about. And usually that boils down to one of three big feelings. Most people store a lot of their anger up in their shoulders and the back of their neck and their jaws and that kind of thing. And a lot of people store their sadness down in the middle of their chest and their fear more down in the belly. You know, people talk about having butterflies and that kind of thing is more of a belly thing. And oftentimes when a couple can get from telling each other how angry they are to identifying what they're scared about or what they're sad about, that gets rid of that truth problem, because then they say, oh, okay, the thing that I can't argue about is I'm scared. I'm scared about what's going to happen to us, or I feel hurt about something that happened. So that kind of getting down to a bottom line, unarguable truth. That's the way we say it. Get down to the truth that can't be argued about. And that has a natural breakthrough potential. It has flow built right into it. Because when people connect at that authentic level, the flow is just automatically
And
there.
the body doesn't lie.
The body doesn't lie.
Well, not only that, when I or anybody says something that's unarguable, how I know that is I feel a burst of aliveness. So if I'm still feeling like there's a quality when you've been in having an argument that you've had before, it's like, and if that's still happening, what I look for is something deeper. And so even underneath feelings are body sensations. And they may not be very profound, but if I can say, like I had a couple who had a breakthrough when he said, I don't know what you mean by this microscopic truth thing. Is it like my palms are sweaty? I said, yes, it's exactly like that. My palms are sweaty. And then the next thing he said was, I don't know why I'm so angry. And his wife burst into tears because she had never heard him speak in that kind of open way. So we've really kind of gone on the journey of what we say that really opens aliveness and connection and our power to make those choices rather than to keep talking at each other rather than really coming from something that is alive in the moment.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I certainly agree with you that the body contains its own set of wisdom here, sometimes more than our minds can articulate.
Sometimes a lot more.
Frequently.
Yeah.
So one of my questions is, so let's say in partnership, somebody does get triggered. It happens every now and then, right?
Occasionally.
Every now and then. And we'll notice it, rather than go into a story around it, saying, okay, my gut is churning around this. So now I'm taking, it's unassailable truth in the moment. This is the observation of what my body is going through. But so go into the feelings and eventually they do kind of resolve themselves. But does that prevent the cycle from recurring? Or how can we really break through to a new, way of being?
Yes, well, oftentimes what happens is as you get more awake, it's kind of a spiral effect where you may pass by the same feeling as you evolve more and more and more, and each time you learn how to handle it in a slightly more conscious way. Like when we first started thinking up all these things in the first year of our relationship and trying to figure them out, we would get stuck sometimes for, I think 3 weeks was our
3 weeks,
all-time maximum.
2 days and 5 hours.
3 weeks, 2 days. And 5 hours.
But who's counting?
And we would just get stuck and feel right and that kind of thing. And then one of us would be able to squeak out some authentic truth like, I'm really sad, or something. Just, all it did was take one little truth to kind of break the vapor lock. And then we got it down to where we'd only get stuck for 3 days. And then we got it down to 3 hours, and then 3 minutes, and then 30 seconds. So finally, after a while, these things do clear up and disappear. And I know we haven't had an argument this century. So,
I know, that's just mind-boggling.
as a matter of fact, neither one of us have said an unpleasant word to the other this century, anything critical or judgmental or anything like that. So it's a good way to keep track of things. All of our problems were in the last century.
Wow.
That was so last century.
That's amazing. Do you feel that, I've heard you say this, and it was going to be one of our questions, and I know that when you had an interviewer that also said, oh, come on now, how could that possibly be that you haven't criticized each other in 10 years or you haven't had an argument in this century? Do you feel that just making that public puts pressure on the two of you, not to ever go there no matter what happens?
They're counting on us. We can't argue. We wanted to.
No, I wish I could say I was that compassionate. There's an ancient Turkish saying that says, if a bald man finds a cure, first he will perfect it on himself. And so that's what I try to do with all these things. I try to do them on myself before I teach them to anybody else.
There's one thing, too, I wanted to say about the whole how do you make a real breakthrough. I found that a lot of people want to fix, or repair, or at least understand what the problem is before they can make it better. And I've found that as we're practicing the kinds of things we've been telling you, that begins to peel away. And what I've found underneath that for lots of people is they really don't know what they want. They're so focused on what's wrong that they haven't given any attention to what works. So one of the questions we ask people, if this were resolved, if this issue were resolved, what would you be doing with yourself with all of that extra energy and time? and start doing that now. So looking at what is it that will really fulfill me? What is it that, and that's again in the root of creativity, what is it that when I'm doing it, I love to do it so much that time disappears, and I get more energy from doing that than I do from doing anything else. And if you let those go on a parallel track, you can see, oh, I can keep expanding and then handling issues as they come up. It's not like I have to get perfect and then I can have what I want, because by then, you know, you may have already exited. It's like, oh, now I know.
Right. So you have children.
Yes.
Yes, and how?
We don't call them children anymore.
No,
They're actually very grown-up
Yeah.
people.
They're very grown-up people,
Yeah.
right? So how do they responded to your work? Are their relationships happy?
I would say, well, just speaking, we were, my daughter was 12 and Katie's son was 11.
I think it was 12 and 13.
12
but
and
somewhere in
13,
there.
somewhere
Yeah.
in there when we first got together.
Okay.
So we don't have any that we brewed up on our own.
Oh, I see.
We have books and videos and students.
Yes. Other children.
Well, I think that I just was texting back and forth with my daughter yesterday. She lives up in the Bay Area, and I think both of them are still probably struggling to get their own relationship lives perfected. Also, I just want to let everybody know that the sons and daughters of self-help gurus don't always turn into self-help gurus themselves. My daughter used to always refer to my work as Dad's psycho crap. Because she's obsessed with art. She's an art person.
She's an artist.
From the time she could
She's-
walk.
yeah.
And so she doesn't really care about the unconscious or the superconscious or all that kind of stuff. She's interested in whether it can turn into an art project or not.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they always say you have to give your kids roots and wings to
Right.
fly. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, we've retired from the
We
parenting.
retired from parenting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there comes a time when we need to just do that,
Yeah.
period.
Yes.
I can relate to that. My son's going to be 48. Can't believe that. And
He
he's
can make
always-
it on his own now. Just give him a little space.
Take those training
Yeah.
wheels off.
No matter what I'm into next that's new, he goes, oh, Mom, not something else. What are you know, so he just kind of rolls his eyes. But
Well, my daughter and I bond over baseball. She's a big baseball fan, as I am. So I go up to San Francisco and take her to the baseball games. And sometimes if she's down this way,
Yeah.
we'll go to a game.
So it really boils down to finding what you love to do together. really.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, you know, these relationship things, I mean, I've been through a number of them myself, and I don't necessarily have any,
You got yourself a track record there.
I do. Maybe some of these people do too, for that matter. Maybe we all have that in common. I understand you actually have some questions that can be both a diagnostic tool as well as potentially even a problem dissolver in relationship, like 5 questions that you can ask of ourselves and our partners that could help to really make a difference to dislodge issues. Could you share? And everybody, if it's time now to get out your pen and paper and take some notes, or put the thing on pause to do so, good idea.
Well, this is a 3-hour class all its own, but just to touch on a couple of things. One thing that almost always needs to be addressed is, where are you experiencing this in your body? So we have different questions for couples and different questions for individuals, but one that almost universally is, how are you experiencing this in your body? Because you see, the language center of the brain is very small. It's like the size of a 25-cent or a 50-cent piece. But here's the rest of us that we need access to. And so one of the things that you do when you ask people to experience something in their body is it takes them out of that language center and the story-making machinery in the mind and gets them down into something that's real. And just like another question we often ask is, like if somebody talks about some issue, is when did this first, or when did you first start seeing the world that way? Or if you drew a line back through time, where would you first have felt this way? And interestingly enough, when people get out of their heads for a moment, they can almost always feel, I'll say, was that in your body when you walked into kindergarten or first grade? And immediately they can say, yeah, it was there. Or no, but it was there when I walked into junior high. So one of the big processes in working with people is to change the location of their consciousness. If it's been up in their heads in the how was I wronged here, or what did I do that was wrong, or all of those kind of stories of wrongness that people get into, where being right comes from, the moment people can drop out of there and say something like, I'm sad right now, or I'm afraid you're going to leave me, or I'm angry that this keeps happening. But it's never, what heals is never, I'm angry at you. That's a place where you might have to start, but I asked the person, how did you first come into, where did you first make up this reality that this problem had to exist? You know, because people will realize, oh, this problem doesn't have to exist. Like, we had a couple that had 3 kids, and it was a family issue, and they used to love to go out and eat together on Saturday night, but they kept getting into arguments about where they would go for the restaurant, because if this person got their restaurant, these other 2 kids would be mad about it, and then so on. So they came in, and they hadn't been out to eat for 6 months because every time they tried to do it, they got into an argument. So we come up with this great new idea. We came up with this sensational new radical treatment, which go out to 5 restaurants on Saturday night, and each one of you gets exactly what you want, and the others just hang out. And they only had to do it one time, because everybody would be sitting around while this other person ate their hot fudge sundae, you know, or the one that hated sushi, but the other 3 that loved sushi, you know, the one could sit there that hated sushi and would go while the others were eating it. So sometimes all that needs to happen is be kind of jostled out of your pattern in order, either in a relationship or just in yourself, to get some new life moving through there.
I think at the very beginning, I ask people, are you willing to resolve this? Are you willing? And then from there I can ask, what do you imagine as the resolved outcome of this? What would you, and which leads into what you really want? I think that's such an important question, and then I'm willing can lead into a new commitment. And those commitments really happen step by step. I think if there's one thing that we've learned that's really universally true is that when you make one new choice, that makes the difference. So right now, that's all you can do is your next action. And if you let yourself choose what you want or you recommit, then you're moving in the direction of what you want rather than collapsing and thinking everything's gone wrong. And
Great, great. You talk about organic spirituality being essential. Would you tell us what you mean by that?
Yes. A lot of people think of spirituality as having something to do with their beliefs. You know, maybe they believe they're going to heaven when they die, or they believe they're going to reincarnate when they die, or something like that. But I think those kinds of things are sort of secondary to what organic spirituality is. Organic spirituality is that moment of, wow, this person is a divine entity. Or, wow, I'm a divine entity. I'm having a spiritual experience. You know, like Wayne Dyer used to say, either you experience yourself as a spiritual being having a human experience, or a human person having an occasional spiritual experience. Very rare. So I like to think that we are spirit, and if you think about it, it makes plain that, because if you look at where we started from, we kind of come out of nothing, and then we come into form, and then we dissolve into nothing again. And that's good enough for me as far as spirituality goes.
Yeah.
I don't need to add anything else onto it, like figuring out if I chose my parents or figuring out where I'm going to reincarnate next. That to me is a kind of secondary sort of belief systems.
Thank you for that. That's really clear. Yeah.
I want to add something to that organic spirituality is the felt experience of being connected to myself and being connected to life around me that's bigger than me. But it's a felt experience of that experience of unity. And we sometimes call it essence, when I'm really experiencing my essence, the core of who I am, and then I'm available for connecting with others and seeing and appreciating and supporting the expression of their essence as well.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about A lot of people in the conscious community are experimenting, you talk about laboratory, with all different forms of relationship, not necessarily limited to two people or two people from the same gender.
Well, I came of age in the 60s. You're talking my language.
Okay.
Yeah. This has happened, yes.
Yeah,
I think every generation does it in one way or another.
Yeah, we're actually big fans of monogamy.
Yes.
I was a latecomer to monogamy. I didn't.
Sometimes you can't know until you try it all out, right?
Right? Exactly. Yeah, it's a living laboratory.
I didn't think that highly of it until I was 34 and I met Katie, and then I realized that only through making a complete commitment to another person was I ever going to be able to tap the depths of what was possible, and so I found that that moment of really connecting and committing to another person allowed me to bring up my deepest fears and move through those. So we're big fans of monogamy. I mean, I'm fine with other people experiencing things however they want to, and we have a lot of people that come to us who aren't necessarily in a romantic relationship, but maybe are committed to a spiritual path, like they might be a nun or something like that. So they're interested in commitment of a different sort, and so there's a place for that. I myself, I always say that I wouldn't enjoy a non-monogamous relationship because I was a university professor for 21 years and I had to serve on enough committees.
I know where you're going with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that I experience with monogamy is, and the deep commitment and recommitment to each other is, like, I feel this deep sense of connection with you, and it's always fresh. So having both of those, which I didn't think was possible, like, you know, really being able to dive deep, but also have this kind of brand newness, because I'm always thrilled whenever I see you and you walk into the room.
Yeah.
I remember reading a quote from one of the Marx brothers, had a long-lasting, wonderful marriage, and after he died, she said something very profound. She said, "There was never a moment when he walked in the room that my heart didn't start racing." And you know, even when she was 70 years old, she
Wow.
said that. And
Yeah.
that's the way I feel about you. You know, I want to feel that, you know, till my last moment on earth.
Well, I'm going to have to accept that as your pearl of wisdom because we are out of time for the interview. But thank you both very, very much.
Yes,
It was
thank
just
you.
delightful
You're
to have
so
you here, and your
welcome.
wisdom is really timeless. Timeless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, many pearls of wisdom we've gotten from today from the two of you. And so, Stu, take it away. Stu's views. I can't wait to hear what you
Me
have
too,
to
because
say
I'm not sure
today.
exactly what it's going to be, so I'm going to let her rip anyway. So yeah, for this edition of Stu's Views, the theme is relationship. And I've had many moments of relationship in relationship. And what I've noticed is there are many moments of deflationship. And in those moments where I feel deeply contracted, deeply triggered, and can really feel it in my body, and you probably have too. I've noticed in those moments, and those are definitely authentic moments, but I've also noticed that in those moments I am definitely connected with what we talked about earlier, what Gay mentioned earlier about organic spirituality and having that sense of connection to something greater. In those moments of my being deflated, and maybe you experience that too, the notion of being connected to something that is eternal, that has graced us with this ability to be incarnate in this particular moment, is really out the window. It really has nothing to do about that. It's all about life is unfair to me right now. I'm powerless, I'm angry, things aren't going my way, and I want to control a different outcome. Something like that. And then I notice, especially if I'm able to spend a little time alone, look in the mirror, actually take some of the Hendricks advice and do something creative that enlivens my soul and makes my heart sing just to be alive, that there's a connection with something greater that we tap into every program here with Get Conscious Now. And that really is about being aware of our infant nature, that we are spirit, happen to be wrapped in this body for a limited time only, and this truly can be an amazing adventure and vacation from being formless. So I highly invite you all to engage in that adventure fully. And with that, it's time for Patricia and her quantum quote.
Thank you. Perfect. Perfect intro to me. Okay, so as you can imagine, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of quotes online around love and relationships. And many of them are on Gay and Katie's sites. But there was one quote that just kept coming up for me as I prepared for this show, and it just wouldn't let up. And I'm not even sure where I heard it from, so I'm just going to claim it today. And it's this: relationships are the bridge to enlightenment. And throughout my spiritual journey as an adult, I've had 2 marriages and many relationships, most of which have been very unfulfilling. And would always fall into this trap of projecting my stuff onto my partner, who would project his stuff onto me. Neither of us would accept the responsibility for our stuff, and we would proceed with a codependent relationship that inevitably ended in failure. And this pattern continued in my life until I realized one very, very important fact, and that was that in all the relationships I had been in, I never really loved myself. I did not love myself. I did not appreciate who I was, and I projected my lack of self-love onto the person and onto all my relationships. And when we don't love ourselves fully, then how can we possibly open to receive the love of our partner? How can we possibly give the love to our partner that they truly deserve? So this was a huge aha experience for me. So, although I consider myself a work in progress still, I've reached a point in time now where I not only love myself, but I understand that I'm a part of all that is. And it's so interesting because the conversation about organic spirituality, and then Stu, I never know what Stu's going to say for his Stu's views, but mine ties right into that. Because what miraculously has happened for me is that I've realized that, I am God in form. And I think that I've always given this conversation lip service because I was raised Catholic, and it was blasphemous to ever say something like, we're God. But the realization I had is that I am God, but that we are all God. In fact, there is nothing that is not God. We're all one, and everything is spirit. So this, to me, has been a huge milestone in my ability to proceed now and have the kind of relationships in all of the areas of my life, but particularly with a beloved that I deserve and that I desire. And so with that, we're going to close the show. Thank you very much for watching tonight. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Stu.
Thank you.
And Katie and Gay. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
And until next time,
Get conscious now.
All right, well done. Thank you.
Well done, well done.
Hi, I'm Melissa Ray of Thrive Beauty Services. I provide transformational beauty services in salon, at home, on site, and at your convenience. I'm proud to be sponsoring Get Conscious Now.
My name is Greg Relow. I'm a local attorney and mediator. I am pleased to be associated with Get Conscious Now. I find the show inspiring. I hope you enjoy the show. Please contact me for help on all your legal matters. I look forward to it.